gang, what's up? Welcome back to Directions. I am Christian Gaddis, the Director of Recruitment Marketing from 43 North. And today, as usual, we're joined by a really interesting guest. I'm excited to jump right into his story. So let's do that. Brian, welcome to Directions.
Hey, thanks, Christian.
Yeah, so happy you could join us. So
this is great.
Typically, we start with our very favorite interview question. Mm-hmm. It's usually like the hardest one that we ask also. But we'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself.
No, everyone's favorite question. My name is Brian Hirsch. I'm a product manager at Helixintel. And I've been there for a little bit, and I've, came through the startup world for the last 10 years. And so it's been a fun journey.
Yeah. And Brian, one of the things I love about your story is, right, you're in startup, you're out of startup, now you're back in startup. Mm-hmm. And we're going to dive into that a little bit as we get into this. But I just want to first like to kick it off, right, with what's the toughest lesson you learned in the startup world that no one warned you about?
That it's chaotic. Everyone knows it's kind of not straightforward, but it is a lot of chaos, but it's the best kind of chaos. You have to get thrown into it. You have to be ready for anything that comes your way. But it makes you learn quicker, and you get to learn a lot, and you have a great time doing it.
Yeah. I mean, that chaos is something that, right, you really do have to be willing to embrace. And for the right person in a startup, it's magic. For the wrong person, or right, to even say the wrong person, but for someone who is not for them, it can be a bit of a nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
So, that part of that chaos and part of what causes that, right, is the fast changes that technology constantly makes, right? How do you stay ahead of that and not get left behind?
You have to just be ready to learn. You have to know that you're not going to know everything, and you have to be ready that everything is going to keep changing, and it changes fast. And as long as you can adapt to that, then you're not going to fall behind, and you're going to be able to keep up.
Yeah, right. And so to learn to always adapt, that touches on one of the things that a couple of our guests talk about of, what they look for from the hiring manager standpoint for startup employees, of someone who's always learning, right? That's one of those like underrated skills. So what would you say is the most underrated skill that can make or break your career?
Oh, it's definitely not a work skill. It's more of a personal skill. And that's being able to leave your ego at home. If you can go in with an open mind and just kind of be ready to hear different ideas and be ready to maybe be wrong and understand that that's okay to be wrong and know that you're not going to know everything, then you're going to succeed. As soon as you have an ego, you block everything out. There's way too much going on in the startup world to kind of keep your mind narrow. And as long as you can just stay open to everyone else's ideas and understand that they might know more than you or have an idea that works a little bit better than yours, then you're just going to keep moving forward. So keep the ego at home.
Yeah, one of our founders has he always says it, and it's interesting, and I'll keep it PG-13 for the podcast, but he calls it a no a-holes rule, right? And this rule goes from investors all the way down to employees. And as soon as you kind of cross that threshold where you get labeled as such, right? He's kind of like, okay, we're done. I'm done with you.
Yeah.
And I think a large part of that is ego. So that's such an interesting thing. Is that kind of being willing to step into that space in a startup, venture out an answer and be wrong? Is that something you learned through an experience, or is that something that just you saw from leadership in your time, at various startups?
There's a bit of both. Fortunately and unfortunately, I got to see the right way how leader did it with no ego, and also the wrong way that leaders have done it, kind of having an ego and not letting you kind of come forward with things.
Yeah.
It was definitely terrifying throwing myself out there with the idea that I might be wrong, because no one wants to be wrong and no one likes to be wrong. And it's hard. But as soon as you can be comfortable with the fact that it's okay to be wrong, then, you're fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I want to dive in a little bit into the work, right? So your work as a product and business analyst, right? What's the one thing that shocked you most about those jobs?
Just kind of the pressure of needing to know a lot. Having been a business analyst, people come to you with a lot of questions based on the product that you're working on, or just the people that you're working with, the direction that you're going. You need to understand how, other types of roles are trying to use the platform that you're working on, or needing to know how to communicate with other, team members who might not see the same way that you see things. And the hardest part was definitely trying to figure out how all of that went together, how to communicate with different people, just kind of taking that pressure on a little bit of needing to know a little bit of everything and kind of running with that. And that thankfully flowed into product management a little bit, just because I could take, those communication skills that I learned and use them to communicate with people that are higher up, use it to communicate with people working directly with clients. And it's not as, it's a little bit behind the scenes, a little bit more on the product side. So you can relax a little bit, but you still have those front end skills of a business analyst to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. So, now I want to shift gears a little bit and kind of talk a little bit about your journey and everything else, right? No, you started off Coach Me Plus kind of in that startup space. You left, took a couple corporate roles, and now I've come back to the startup space with Helix, right? So I would love to know from someone who's been kind of on, both sides of the fence, what's the biggest lie people have told you about working in a startup, and how did you find out the truth?
I think the biggest lie was that startups aren't as structured, or as, maybe as, I don't want to say legitimate, but not as kind of like, almost like they don't have a direction, which is never true. And some people kind of stay away from it because they think it's too casual, or they think that it's just corporate's the best way because it's safe and it's secure. And while the journey might seem a little bit safer from the corporate side, the startups are just as structured, and they have a goal. And sure they play hard, but they work harder, and they have that dream in mind of being a successful company. And so you need structure, because if there's no structure, you're not going to get anywhere. And so the biggest lie was definitely, thinking that structure wasn't there with the startup, and that's just not true.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny when you think about it, because every startup founder typically, right, dreams of building a large corporation in some way, shape, or form, right?
Absolutely.
Their dream may not be to be there once it's a corporation and once they have all those things. But in order to do that, you do have to have rules and structures in place. I always just like to think the rules at a startup are a little bit more bendy than the rules at a corporation.
For sure.
More lenient. Yeah. So be honest with me here, Brian, now, right? Did you always see yourself in tech, or was that something that you kind of just, happened upon you?
No, I stumbled into that completely. I came out of college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was freaking out a little bit. I didn't have much personal direction on any dreams or goals or aspirations. And I was kind of struggling a little bit. And I stumbled into an internship at Coach Me Plus. And I was terrified because I didn't know tech. I knew sports, but I didn't know tech. And so I was worried that they were going to ask me to do all these crazy tech things, and that there was going to be so much pressure, just tech involved. And ended up being one of the best experiences I've ever had, as far as work goes. And it was awesome.
Yeah. Those intros into startups is so critical, especially in this community. It's so great to be able to have opportunities like that, right?
Absolutely.
So often when I'm on college campuses, I hear, students saying, I just didn't know these type of roles were here.
Yeah.
So it's great whenever someone finds it and they discover, man, okay, this thing, this space, it's for me, right? So you touched on this a little bit before of like startup chaos. And then even now when you were talking about kind of that pressure of being like, are they going to ask me to do something that I just have no clue how to do? Right. And so, little mix of that chaos and imposter syndrome of like, do I belong? Should I be in this space? What is this stuff? Am I equipped? Right. How do you handle both startup chaos and that imposter syndrome? Especially knowing that sometimes they combine in the world of startups.
It's definitely there. You have to, it kind of relates to, not having that ego and being okay with being wrong. And you have to find that balance of just going in and asking questions, because there are going to be things in the startup world where you're going to have to do them, or you're going to be asked to do them, and you won't know what you're doing. And one of the best parts though, is that you get to figure it out. And then you know that, and you know how to do that moving forward. And it's just continuous learning. So once you kind of break through that first initial wall of being afraid to be wrong, then it's all open. And you're not just going, blazing around everywhere, just being wrong and throwing, dumb ideas out, but you're comfortable being in situations where you might not know what you're doing. But then you're open to asking questions, and you go to leadership, and you go to peers, and you even reach out to other companies. And it was one of the cool things about being in the 43 North space was when I was asked to do something, I could go to a company down the hall or on the other side of the room and say, hey, I was asked to do this. Do you guys know like what this is? Can you help me out with it? And it was awesome. So as long as you can, communicate and just be open to learning, then you can break through that imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that supportive community always helps, right?
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, love that. So I'd love to hear now, even with that, right? How can someone tell if they're built for the startup life, or if they should just run like hell in the other direction?
So personally, with my story, just kind of where I came from, career-wise and education-wise, I think anyone is built for it. And I think anyone should be open to the idea of the startup world, except people who they want to be complacent and they want to just sit and have a 9-to-5, have their tasks laid out for them, still hardworking, but just they, aren't open to the chaos. If you are someone that is open to just having new experiences thrown at you and just having to go learn and being thrown into the fire, then you're definitely built for startup world, because no matter what role you start in, you will learn enough to where you can kind of branch out and find a different role that fits you perfectly.
Yeah. So now flip it, right? You're talking to that person that is maybe looking to make that jump from corporate to startup, right? What's the biggest mistake you think someone can make trying to jump from the corporate world into the startup world?
Thinking it's easy. Going back to people like not really lying, but not thinking that it's very structured. I think that there are people who might come from the corporate world where there are definitely a lot more rules that are a little more strict. There's more procedures and things are set up a certain way. And I think that people think if they go to a startup, it'll be easy. And there are days where, it might be fine and you're comfortable, but if you're not ready to just keep learning and going and moving quick in that fast pace, then it's going to be a little tough for you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So now, one more position we'll put you in, that you're going to be talking to your younger self, right? If you could go back, what's one thing you wish you knew before starting your career in tech?
Let's see. Just that it's fun. It's fun. And there are a lot of people out there to meet, and to not hold yourself back to meeting people. And if you can go out and you can, again, just being open, and I keep saying it, but as long as you're just accepting that there's so much going on in the startup world and you're all going to take it all at once, as long as you can kind of work on absorbing some of that, it's going to be fun.
Yeah. The next thing I was going to ask you, now that you mentioned meeting people, right, was what are your thoughts on networking, right? Is it worth it? Is it overhyped? Like, what's the deal?
You got to do it.
Yeah.
It makes it so easy. I'm very lucky to say that my entire career is based off of networking, and not a typical, who you know, but who you've met and who you've talked to. And I came into Coach 3 Plus because I had a close connection with someone, and finding out the internship through Coach 3 Plus in 43 North. And I met people at 43 North who, because I networked with them, I have my job now back in the startup space 10 years later. And like, how cool is that? Yeah. Like, just because I was networking and just continued to meet people, my career has grown, and it's been awesome.
Yeah. I mean, and this is the community to do it in. I think Buffalo is one of those unique spaces where we're a city of connectors. So it's always great to be able to hear that. And I always tell people, and I feel like they're just like, yeah, you're just saying that because you want to pack your events. And it's like, yeah, I want to pack my events, but also like there's going to be some good that comes of this from you, because that's just who we are as a community. It's, the cliche moniker, city of good neighbors, but it usually rings true.
Absolutely. Yeah. Every job I've gotten along the way, from starting in the startup world to then, like you've mentioned, going to the corporate world and then back, was all because of networking.
Yeah. Well, Brian, this has been amazing. Always great to chat with you.
Always a pleasure.
So thanks so much for joining us. I'm sure we'll have you back at some point with some other great news from Helix.
I'd love it.
Is there anything you want to share with the people, with the world, anything we missed on that you would just love to send a message out to folks who are thinking about startups or looking or interested in any type of jobs?
Do it. Just do it. If you're afraid, don't be afraid to take that entry level job. It will grow somewhere. And it's an amazing experience to go through the startup from beginning to end. And while it could be terrifying, you might not know exactly where you want to be. Just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've said it before. This is not an unusual sign off from us, because we usually have a lot of folks who say, like, if you're thinking about it, if you're curious, just do it. So once again, folks, just do it. Keep your eyes peeled for the next episode of Directions. I've been Christian Gaddis. Thanks for joining us.